Hi everyone, it's Miss Dillon again, coming at you with your second video about government. A couple of things I forgot to mention in the last video. Number one, the due dates for all of your work. So the week of April 27th, we're going to be doing the exact same thing, exchanging packets out like we did for you to get this packet. Check out Miss G's Instagram, or you can always email me. Just a reminder that when you're turning in these packets, they need to be completed. I'm letting you know right now, if I'm going through and grading it and that there are blank pages, that kind of stuff, you're not going to get the points. And if you don't get the points, you don't pass, and then you're going to be stuck taking my class again. And I know you all don't want that. Okay, so we're going to move on. We're going to finish up with topic 1 because there are a couple of things I forgot about. And then we're going to move on to topic 2 and 3. And then you won't have to hear my voice again until the next video drops. Okay? Going back to topic 1, this is still looking at suffrage and the ability for voting rights. So we talked about with the 15th Amendment, the original creators of the 15th Amendment believed that, okay, we gave African American men the right to vote, nothing is going to stand in their way. We figured out that that's actually not true. There were poll taxes, there were literacy tests. So the 24th Amendment was passed in 1964. Think about that. That is really only about 50, don't judge my math, years ago, a little more than 50. So my grandparents are in their 70s. Like, they remember when the 24th Amendment was passed, and what the 24th Amendment does is says that poll taxes are not allowed. So you cannot use poll taxes to stop people from voting. Now, like I said, originally it was only white landowning men. The 15th Amendment comes in, the 19th Amendment comes in, the 24th Amendment, and now look at this. We are all voting, okay? If you are 21 years of age. Now, here's the trick with the 26th Amendment. As you know from your amendment test, the 26th Amendment changes the voting age from 21 to 18. Here's the reason why that happens, and this is the goal that I want you to understand, why these amendments are here and how they are helping us gain access to our right to vote, okay? So the poll tax was originally created to stop former slaves and African Americans from voting because they were originally at an economic disadvantage. So giving them a tax to pay would be hard, okay? So the 26th Amendment, in 1942, right as the United States enters World War II, they create a draft. And if you don't remember from your American history classes, drafts are when the government calls for men to join the military. That's right, we're still not caught up in allowing women in the draft in 2020 as well. It is just for men. But in 1942, the original draft age was 21 to 36. When World War II hits, they change it to 18. Now imagine this, you're 18 years old, you're fighting for your country, you're trying to defeat Hitler and the Nazis, but you're not allowed to vote. In fact, at this point, you can drink alcohol at this point, I take it back. But they were getting ready to repeal alcohol, or they had just had. So they came up with this slogan, and FDR, Franklin Roosevelt, during the World War II, he wanted to change the voting age. He had asked some people in legislation, they said no. So they had this phrase, old enough to fight, old enough to vote. So FDR could not get this pushed through before he passed away. Then in President Eisenhower's turn, he was asking for this in the 50s. And then when the Vietnam War hits, there are still soldiers who are old enough to fight and die for their country, but they weren't old enough to vote to determine, should we really be in this war in the first place? Because remember, presidents don't decide that. That's Congress. And when we vote, we do not just vote for our president. We vote for members of the legislative branch. We vote for the laws that they try to pass. So by not being able to vote at 18, they were being essentially forced to participate in wars that they had no say in. So a little bit of background information here, opposition. So there were states that had voluntarily, President Eisenhower asked states if they would voluntarily lower the age from 21 to 18. Now, we've discussed this a lot when we talk about the difference between the state government and the federal government. There are powers that the state government has that the federal government does not have, and there are powers that the federal government has that the state government doesn't have. So Eisenhower asks these states to lower the voting age. There were 17 states that refused, and they said that 18-year-olds lacked, we're talking 18, 19, and 20-year-olds, lacked the maturity and the responsibility to vote. How do you feel about that? Do you think that we should be 18? There was a push in this country about 5 years ago to lower the voting age to 16. Could you imagine that? So this is causing a lot of tension in the US. And then there's a court case. You know there's always going to be a court case with Miss Dillon. Oregon versus Mitchell. The state of Oregon is going to argue that the federal government does not have the power to force states to change the voting age. That is not okay. So they challenged the law, and they said that Congress can only regulate federal elections. They can't regulate state elections. So for example, Congress is going to, when they pass the 26th Amendment, it says that you can vote in any election if you're 18. Oregon says that's okay for federal elections, but not okay for Oregon-specific elections. So this court case goes through. Eventually they decide, no, the federal government has the power to set this up. So when we talk about that division between states and the federal government, please remember that that is what principle of the Constitution? I'm going to pretend that you all yelled federalism because you paid attention in Miss Dillon's class and you know these things and you make her proud all the time, but that's federalism. To connect that to what's going on in 2020. So we know that Ohio's governor, Mike DeWine, issued a stay-at-home order, which says that everyone in the state of Ohio has to stay at home unless they are working what is considered an essential job, okay? Now, while that was happening in Ohio, Florida beaches were packed with college students on spring break, absolutely packed, no social distancing whatsoever, causing the number of coronavirus cases and deaths to shoot up in Florida. So people in Florida were asking the governor, please issue a stay-at-home order. The governor said no. They then started contacting the federal government, asking the federal government, can you issue a stay-at-home order? And in several statements that Donald Trump has made, he was determining, kind of arguing back and forth with himself, does the federal government have the right to issue a federal stay-at-home order, or is that a state's right power? So this idea of federalism is something that is still going on in 2020. This is not something that we just kind of forget about. States and the federal government often compete over who has the power to do these things. So that's kind of where we get there. If you look at my meme over to the right, it says how Congress looks when young people don't vote. Notice he's really old. So a lot of young people are electing younger officials. There's the Senator Alexandria Cortez, I believe I left out one of her names. She is a younger congresswoman. So when we kind of take a look at this, when we have younger people voting, we're typically going to see younger people being elected into office, because if you can't vote, you can't be elected into office. So before the 26th Amendment happened, if you were 20 years old, you served in World War II, you were a war veteran, you could not run for Congress. You couldn't even run for mayor of your small town. Nothing. All right. And then I just think this is funny. I know you all like Drake. So it says young adults in voting elections, not voting and complaining about the results. I'm going to say this. I'm going to stand up on my soapbox for a second. Your votes matter. Everyone's votes matter. So if you are eligible to vote, you should be voting. It is your responsibility. If you don't vote and then you complain about the results of that vote, that's not okay. When you don't vote, you are agreeing with the majority. So, for example, a friend of mine did not vote in the 2016 election, and then as soon as Donald Trump was, elected president, they complained a lot about, oh, I can't believe Donald Trump became president. Well, did you vote? No, I didn't. Well, then what are you complaining about? So I just thought this meme was funny.